So I'm going to watch a video here by Maurice Delk. The name of that video is Black People in 2020 Use Racism as an Excuse for Their Issues. Um, this is a kind of common argument that I see, but I just want to hear somebody's particular perspective on it and then maybe speak to that afterward. But let's hear what he has to say.
What's good, everybody? What's good, everybody? This is Maurice Delk.
He does start his video with some pretty bumping music, so I'm not mad at him for that.
See, I said early on my tweet that black people nowadays in 2020 love playing a victim, and they blame everything on racism. But you got the blacks that in 1920 wasn't playing a victim. They was more like, you know what, let me go ahead and have faith. Let me have faith. This generation don't have no faith. They totally lost their faith. Like even white.
I'm not sure what he means by playing the victim in this situation, particularly in the situation of people who were around in the 20s and had little option but to kind of literally do the best they could because it was illegal for them to not hold jobs and things that could very much end up with them in a worse position than just being homeless. So they didn't really have much of an option because of racist policies. This is not a great way to start this off.
Look at the Me Too movement. That's a victim movement.
Number one, why is he so upset about that? And number two, I mean, survivor would probably be a better term, but yes, he is technically correct here. Me Too is a movement that is largely made up of victims of sexual assault. So I'm not sure why you would yell that angrily. I'm not sure why that would be so upsetting. Aside from the sexual assault, which is pretty upsetting.
And this generation, we are living in a sensitive generation. They play the victim card. Everything is racist according to the new age black people. Then you got whites, right? They go and egg it on. You're right, they're racist. Let me go ahead and march with you. Yes, he racist. She's racist. Oh my God, Becky, they're racist. Let's go tell the rest of the black people that they're racist. Let's show them that Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. And so guess what? They grab the Antifa folks together, right? They grab the Antifa and be like, hey, ho, ho, white supremacy gotta go, hey.
So Antifa really has nothing to do with this. Antifa is anti-fascism and anti-fascists, which, like, yeah, there are anti-fascists at Black Lives Matter protests, but it's not like people are going to meet up with their anti-fascist contingent to go to the Black Lives Matter thing. Anti-fascists care about fascists mostly. So if there's a Proud Boys event, then Antifa's probably going to show up. But if it's Black Lives Matter, probably it's not what you're claiming it is. Goodness.
BLM has followed the Antifa. They follow that liberal agenda. They follow that victim mentality because they were taught that way. Planned Parenthood teaches the victim mentality. But the blacks in the 60s.
Planned Parenthood doesn't teach anybody anything except for, I'm sure, health stuff because they are a health clinic. I'm not sure why there's an implication here that they're educating Antifa or BLM, the organization, not the movement, because those are two very distinctly different things. Yeah, I'm going to let him keep going. Oh, yeah, that's right. Why also does he keep harking back to, like, black people at least a generation or two ago? Why not talk about how black people have been doing in maybe the year 1990 or even 1980, 2010. But we seem to really be going back starting in the 20s, and now I guess we've gotten up to the 60s, so that's good. This is where things took a bit of a sharp turn, and kind of going on with his argument that people today are too soft, he decided to use a particular example from antiquity, and I'm just gonna have to say content warning sexual assault.
I'm going to say this. When they got Great Lady Monster, guess what? It got to a point they still stood up and hold faith and said there's going to be a day when we be free.
I understand the faith argument, but there's also the argument to be said that maybe these people were fearing for their lives, because telling the person who owned them no would probably have dire consequences that they did not want to have wrought upon them. It's more complex than, unfortunately, this gentleman is making it sound.
If they can hit the future right now and see this, they be like, this is all y'all dealing with? Y'all want to say everything is racism? You got white people actually fighting for y'all? You got white people that actually love y'all? You ain't got to go through the Underground Railroad? Y'all playing the victim? Rewind the time, go with my time.
So, so far he seems to have been kind of building up this argument that throughout history, black people have just sort of taken what has been dished out to them and just stood firm and moved forward with it. Yet, he now acknowledges the Underground Railroad, which is pretty active resistance to slavery. So he was just talking a moment ago about how slaves just stood firm and were faithful and knew one day there would be a day, and now he's talking about the Underground Railroad, but you have to reconcile those things if you're going to make this argument. I get that he's talking stream of consciousness, but I also have a strong feeling he's thought about this and had this firm in his mind, and it's just weird that, like, I don't know, maybe he will come back and reconcile it at one point, but so far I'm not too sure that's going to happen.
Damn it.
I
call out what I've been around. I call out because they pander my culture. I'm not going to say my people because they're not my people. This is my culture. My people are the one that's obedient, because obedient is better than sacrifice.
I'm not sure what the sacrifice that he's referring to is. But again, to go back to his people being obedient, what about those slaves who utilized the Underground Railroad and the people who made the Underground Railroad happen? And I mean that from like a logistical standpoint, not the people who are producing and utilizing the slaves and creating a need for the Underground Railroad. But I guess we're just not going to reconcile these things, and he's just going to go further with it.
Black people in the 1800s, black people in the physical slavery days didn't play the victim.
Okay, so we're back to this. Underground fucking Railroad.
There's equal opportunities to everybody. And it's up to you to make a difference. You gotta, why you can't look in the goddamn mirror at yourself? I looked in the mirror at myself. I'm 48 years old. And when I was in my 20s, I was messing up. The cops had a reason to stop me. I didn't go play the victim. They stopped me because I'm black. No, they stopped me because I was selling drugs. I was a gang member.
I, for instance, am one person who the cops have stopped a lot in my youth, from the time that I was a child up to the time that I was about, I want to say 20-ish, 18, till I was 18. When I left my hometown, it all got better. But I made sure to keep my nose clean all the time. I never actually did anything that was worthy of police interaction. I had also become a police explorer when I was a teenager because I wanted to become a cop. So I spent a lot of time around the police from my hometown. And after I ended up leaving Police Explorers to do musical theater, my police encounters actually ratcheted up to the most that I'd had in my entire life in my hometown. And they weren't like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" check-in stops. They were stops trying to find me doing something that they could arrest me for. Yet they knew that I was very not into illegal activity and didn't smoke or drink, and all of these personal details of my life, quite frankly. They knew a lot of my personal shit, as well as my grandparents, who I lived with quite intimately, because they were there a lot, not like doing crimes or anything, but because they were like picking me up, dropping me off, all that kind of stuff. And they had words to to say sometimes, but yeah, I'm not sure how that really reconciles with the just do better, because that clearly doesn't work for everyone. It didn't work for me, and I was a police explorer. So, what's up with that?
Even the can I tell you something? Even a lot of the black slaves in the 1800s, in the slavery days, didn't have that victim mentality. They were singing. They weren't singing to the white man. They were singing to Jesus. They were singing. They were singing praises. They would lift the voice. They had the mentality, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. And you
Also, if you have a feasible chance, escape via the Underground Railroad or any other means necessary. He says all this as though all of the slaves were just kind of happily dancing in the fields and shit, and like just being like, "Oh, God will save us." And that's not what happened. That's not what the reality was. There was planning, there was scheming to escape or sometimes maybe retaliate. There were some really heinous retaliations that came about when these things get found out. It's not as simple as this is being framed, and it frustrates me because I'm sure that these things have to have crossed his mind at some point.
I'm out of here. I still had to say, next!
That was very intense. So that was a hell of an argument. And I kind of wanted to expand more on this idea of black people using racism as kind of a crutch or playing the victim card. And this is something that kind of interests and frustrates me about how people approach it, depending on which side they're on, or even if they're ostensibly in the center. I feel like there is a bit of a conflation that happens with a lot of people when, for instance, someone talks about the effects of systemic racism and how they have a real impact today. I feel like to a lot of people, that just sounds like someone saying, "Oh, well, they're just saying the hospital is racist or something," when in fact someone might be talking about The fact that hospitals in their area might be extremely under resourced because of redlining in the past. What I didn't mention there, because I was just kind of stream of consciousness talking, there's also definitely a disparity in care between black patients and the care that many other patients get. And that's something that does seriously need to be addressed. Um, it does have roots in the same place of everything else I'm talking about. And it's getting better, but it needs to get much better, much faster, because people's lives actually hang in the balance, especially now in the time of COVID, when black people are especially susceptible and often have subpar healthcare. The fact that we've had so many racially driven policies in America means that racism is kind of inbuilt to an extent. There's a reason that we're talking about systemic racism. You don't have a country that's built on so many racist policies, have it remove those racist policies, and expect there to be no consequences after that point. Another thing that he mentioned was this idea that everybody has equality. And while that's the ideal, it's not necessarily true. People don't start out with the same resources. Somebody that starts out in somewhere that has been horribly redlined, which generally people call those ghettos, somebody who's born there as opposed to somebody who's born in some middle class suburb, have drastically different chances at birth. And yeah, you can definitely take steps during your life to get yourself out of a bad situation and into a better one, and perhaps a great one. But that's not necessarily the average thing. That's not what normally happens. That's the exception more than it is the rule, unless there is some change in that environment and there are resources for that person to get themselves up. People need help for this stuff. That's that's just a human fact. People can't do everything alone, especially when things have been in the past so stacked against them. They don't just magically get to start at the same starting line because someone declared that racism is now illegal, especially when people have flouted the ideas of civil rights and liberty. When those sometimes still go challenged, how can we really say that everybody has an equal opportunity? Like, yeah, there's equal opportunity under the law, and then there's equal opportunity in practice. And those are two different things. I think my last issue here is this kind of underlying idea that people who, for instance, go to lengths to mention, hey, systemic racism exists, or there's massive disparities in policing, or things like that. Um, it feels a lot like many people believe that this is just something that we've heard and we're just parroting without taking any time to look into ourselves, when the reality is data backs up that there are some serious issues with the way that we police in terms of black people. There are huge disparities in sentencing, arrests, and stops that have been documented. So it's really frustrating that so many people kind of pretend that doesn't exist or it doesn't matter. I don't know. I think ultimately, I don't have a problem with people voicing their ire toward those who do use racism as a crutch for things that they could fix themselves. But I also do feel like a lot of times I hear the argument it just excludes so many factors that are outside of a person that were the effect, or that are the effect, I should say, of policies that are no longer in place, but powerful enough to have that lasting effect. Like if there was no redlining, or nothing like redlining in the US, where would the ghettos be? If there was a way for black people to build generational wealth such that it was on par with the median now, what would crime be like in black communities? I think this is really a discussion that needs to happen, especially with black conservatives. Not actually just black conservatives, to be honest, because not everyone who has this mentality is conservative. And we need to understand that as well. Life is complex, people are complex, and black people don't agree on everything. But I think this is a very important thing to have an extended discussion about, because there are some very real consequences today for systemic racism, that are tearing families apart, that are reducing the chances that people have to be their best selves, to live their best lives. And that's gone on forever. And we can make it better. And yes, it is going to take some faith and some patience, but it is also going to take some active steps. And we can't take active steps without looking at the problem as it exists. And I guess that's all I got. Take care for now.
Thanks for watching. This has been Jedi Saboteur. You can find me elsewhere on Twitch and Twitter at Jedi Saboteur. It's the same name everywhere. If you have any suggestions for creepy, spooky, or mysterious content, I would totally love to hear them. Feel free to drop a comment down there, and yeah, check back sometime. I'll probably have some new stuff up.